Did you know that 1 in 3 people in the United States is struggling with high inflammation? And this means that 1 in 3 people in the United States is at increased risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmunity, cognitive changes, and cancer. Inflammation is the tie that binds, bringing together all aging, all chronic disease, and all disability. If there is one single thing that requires focus as we strive to live a better and healthier life, it's managing our inflammation. The purpose of this video is to review everything that you need to know about the process of inflammation. Consider this video your one-stop shop for inflammation, because at the end of this video, you should have a good idea of where you stand. Most importantly, you are going to learn the next best steps that you can take to drive your body to a state of health over one of disease. My name is Scott Resnick. I'm a medical doctor, a former surgeon, and I've been studying and practicing functional medicine for the last 15 years. I'm making these videos to give you the science and the structure that you need to turn around your health without using drugs. In my private practice, I've always been so impressed by how much you knew and wanted to learn about your body. But the natural and alternative landscapes are so confusing and so noisy. The purpose of this YouTube channel is to create clarity and order. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because it helps to get the word out. In this video, we're going to review 4 things. The first will be to discuss what inflammation is. Unfortunately, the word inflammation is so frequently used and so infrequently understood. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what inflammation does for the body and the 4 cardinal signs of inflammation. With this information, you can then develop some insight into your own inflammatory state. The second step in this video will be to identify what could be causing the inflammation. This is important because to correctly address inflammation, you'll need to first consider what is driving it. As we will see later in this video, there are a number of behavioral, dietary, nutritional, and supplemental interventions that can be made to lower inflammation. We'll then address the dietary interventions and the supplements that have been scientifically shown to lower inflammation. So what is inflammation? In its simplest form, inflammation is a defense process that protects us from the outside world across our barriers. Our primary barriers to protect are our skin, the lining of our lungs, and the lining of our gut. There are other barriers as well. Namely the blood-brain barrier and the subendothelial layer that lines each of our blood vessels. But we need to be able to take nutrients in across these barriers and expel out our metabolic waste across these same barriers. And sadly, there are innumerable microbes, toxins, and synthetic molecules that gain access to our body across these barriers as well. Inflammation is a complex and diverse process. It involves the recognition of molecular signals in the outside world. It involves molecules like histamine that dilate blood vessels to allow greater access for the immune cells. It involves chemical signals known as cytokines that instruct how these immune cells are to behave. And finally, once the battles have been fought, inflammatory signaling guides the tissue repair and regenerative processes as well. In its simplest form, inflammation is the presence of activated oxygen molecules with extra electrons. These molecules are known as reactive oxygen species and take the scientific names of the hydroxyl anion, superoxide, and peroxides. These are all molecules that have a lone electron in their outer shell. But these solitary electrons don't like to be alone, and they greedily snatch up other electrons from other important molecules in our body, namely fats and our DNA. These activated oxygen molecules, when dumped on a microbe, kill it. Our body gladly accepts survival in exchange for pain, swelling, and scarring. But this brings up an important point, because while the inflammatory and immune-mediated processes protect us from dangerous molecular signals in the environment, it is important to remember that our body generates inflammation from the use of oxygen to make energy. Evolutionary biologists believe that at some time in our distant past, we created a symbiotic relationship with an oxygen-using bacterium that would ultimately become our mitochondria. With this arrangement, we were able to make 36 molecules of ATP from a molecule of glucose using oxygen. Lacking oxygen, we were only able to make 2 units of ATP, but this arrangement came with a Faustian exchange. One of the byproducts of using oxygen to make energy are reactive oxygen species. Not only does our body need to buffer us from these potentially dangerous molecules and microbes in the environment, it also needs to buffer inflammation made secondarily to normal physiological processes, namely just breathing oxygen. So how do you know if you are inflamed? Fortunately, there is a group of 4 rhyming Latin words that characterize the overall process. So take a moment to consider these, because as more of these apply to you, the greater risk of an underlying inflammatory process. The first word is rubor, which is Latin for red. The redness results from increased blood flow secondary to vasodilatation, and this makes sense. The neurotransmitter histamine dilates blood vessels, allowing more blood to flow to the injured area and for the delivery of more immune cells. The second Latin word is tumor, which means swelling. With increased blood flow, increased tissue and cellular damage, tissues swell. Do you get a bloated, swollen belly after eating certain foods? Do you notice that you have some swelling over your joints? These could be signs of a degree of underlying inflammation. The third cardinal sign of inflammation is calor, meaning heat. Have you wondered why we get a fever when we're infected? Our bodies recognized long ago that the chemical processes in microbes don't work as well at high temperatures. We learned to exchange fevers and chills for the destruction of an invading microbe. This inconvenience was a reasonable exchange for survival. And the final cardinal sign is dolor, meaning pain. The warmth, swelling, and release of the inflammatory cytokines irritate the nerves that are present in the tissues. This is perceived as pain. Now take a moment to reflect upon these 4 cardinal signs. Is there a part of your body that is suffering from one or more of these signs? There's a good chance that you have an underlying inflammatory process in play. So we have discussed how inflammation is a protective process. It protects us from the outside environment. An easy way to remember what drives inflammation is to consider the presence of dangerous strangers. We are surrounded by invisible microbes that would love to gobble down our proteins, our fats, our glucose. Additionally, our immune system protects us against toxins in the environments, such as organic chemicals or poisons. Surprisingly, one of the greatest drivers of inflammation in the developed world is not a microbe or a toxin, but obesity. Fat cells are like little inflammation factories, and as we consume more carbohydrates, release more and more insulin, develop a greater degree of insulin resistance, and accumulate a greater fat mass, inflammation increases. Plain and simple. There are a number of different ways to measure inflammation, but the easiest is with a simple, inexpensive marker known as the high-sensitivity CRP. CRP, or C-reactive protein, is released by the liver in response to inflammatory cytokines. Optimally, this number is less than 1, but as the CRP exceeds 3, this represents an ongoing accelerated inflammatory state. I mentioned earlier that obesity and insulin are strong contributors to inflammation worldwide. When assessing inflammation, it is really reasonable to measure a fasting insulin level in addition to your hemoglobin A1C as well. Optimally, a fasting insulin level is under 7, and your hemoglobin A1C should be less than 5.4. The remainder of this video is going to focus on the steps that you can take to lower your inflammation. This is activated through behavioral changes, diet, and supplementation. We will discuss each of these individually. The 2 foundational behavioral changes that have been scientifically shown to lower inflammation are sleep and exercise. And I'm not going to dive into these topics in this video, but suffice it to say that with more sleep and more exercise, we can lower the production and effects of these inflammatory molecules. Some simple dietary modifications can be put into place today that will help you to lower your inflammatory state. And while there's a lot of data on diets like the paleo diet, which avoids excessive carbohydrates and thus excessive insulin and fat production, unquestionably the best all-around diet for health and wellness is the Mediterranean-style diet. Focusing on complex grains, a rainbow of vegetables, smaller portions of meat, and the consumption of small, fatty fish like mackerel and sardines. This diet helps to manage insulin while prompting our DNA to make anti-inflammatory molecules through these plant-based phytonutrients. The most important thing to avoid is processed and packaged foods. Recall that one of the driving forces of inflammation is the presence of molecules that work against as opposed to for our normal biology. Plastics, preservatives, pesticides, herbicides, gums, and dyes, these all activate the inflammatory processes through our immune system. And finally, there are a number of supplements that boost extensive research and lower inflammatory pathways. I'm going to cover the 4 that I think have the greatest amount of supportive research. Curcumin is the active component of the turmeric root, and this spice is characteristic of the yellow Indian curries, and it's been studied extensively to lower inflammation in the body. The herb is safe, It's uniformly well tolerated and it's inexpensive. Of note, curcumin is not easily absorbed into the body. Absorption is improved by using a phytosomal form or by pairing it with piperine, a molecule which is found in peppercorns. Black cumin seed oil is another potent anti-inflammatory molecule, and similar to curcumin, it works across a variety of different inflammatory pathways and holds great potential. The omega-3 fats that are found in fish oils are another potent anti-inflammatory supplement. These fats, dosed at about 2 grams daily of EPA with DHA, have been shown to lower inflammatory markers and to improve cardiovascular health. And finally, aged garlic extract, dosed at 600 milligrams twice daily, is another well-studied supplement that has been shown to lower inflammation and to support cardiovascular health. Hopefully, you took a moment to review the 4 cardinal signs of inflammation. The next step will be to obtain some laboratory data, ideally with a high-sensitivity C-reactive protein and a fasting insulin level. And I reviewed the behavioral, dietary, and supplemental options that have the most scientific support. So, where do you stand on the spectrum of health? Sadly, conventional medicine is diagnosis-based, and it misses opportunities to identify signs and symptoms until it's too late. And at that time, the only recourse is to use a pharmaceutical drug. I've developed a simple, at-home series of questions that I like to call the Functional Health Assessment to help you to understand where you fall on this spectrum. With a set of measurements using tools that you have available in your home, you can gauge your overall state of health. If you look in the description of this video, you will find a link to this free guide. From here, you can develop the insight to make the required changes for a life of health, energy, and longevity. I'll see you guys in the next video, and take care.